They thought slapping her would silence her, but 1 second later, the ground itself seemed to turn against them. The night was unnaturally quiet, the kind of silence that didn't just hang in the air, it pressed down on the skin. A lone streetlight flickered over the cul-de-sac, where a row of identical houses stood like obedient soldiers. Each trimmed lawn the same length, each mailbox painted the same dull shade of gray. This was HOA territory, and for anyone who dared to step outside their invisible line of control, punishment came fast and merciless. But tonight, something was about to happen that no one in that neighborhood, no one in the entire county would ever forget. The black woman stood on her porch, arms folded, chin lifted, a defiance in her stance that had drawn whispers for months. She was new to this community, and the HOA board hadn't welcomed her with neighborly smiles. Instead, they had sent notices. Petty fines. Threats disguised as warnings. Every week another letter arrived. Remove your flowers. Park your car correctly. Fix your shutters. And every week she ignored them. That was her first mistake. According to them, the second, they would say, was standing tall against the bikers who rolled in that night. 2 Harley engines growled down the street, vibrating through the pavement. They weren't ordinary bikers, these men were the HOA's unofficial enforcers, ones who took care of what the paperwork couldn't handle. The neighbors called them the committee. Everyone else just stayed out of their way. She didn't move when the bikes pulled up to her driveway. She didn't flinch when the men stepped off, boots crunching against the gravel. And she didn't lower her gaze when the taller one, the one with the snake tattoo, spiraling down his neck, stepped up and sneered. Still ignoring the rules, huh? He muttered. Her voice was steady. I don't bow to rules written by bullies. That was the moment the street changed. The shorter biker chuckled, sound low and sharp like broken glass. Then, with a movement so fast the watching neighbors barely registered it, he lifted his hand and slapped her across the cheek. The crack echoed off the walls, sharp enough to snap the silence in two. Gasps spilled from the shadows where curtains had parted. But then, before anyone could even blink, the impossible happened. The bikers hit the ground. No one saw what tripped them, what force threw them backward. All anyone saw was 2 bodies slamming onto the asphalt, limbs twisted, helmets clattering away like toys. And the woman. She hadn't moved an inch. Her cheek burned red, but her eyes were cold fire. The neighborhood erupted in whispers. Some said it was divine justice. Others swore she'd done something unseen, something unholy. The HOA president, watching from across the street, clenched his fists so tight his knuckles turned bone white. He didn't just see defiance anymore. He saw a threat, and threats had to be eliminated. By morning, rumors had spread beyond the cul-de-sac. At the grocery store, clerks leaned across counters whispering about that woman. At the diner, forks clattered against plates as men speculated about what had really happened. The story twisted with each retelling. Some swore she had powers. Others said it was a setup. The bikers themselves refused to explain. Bruised, humiliated, they left the hospital with heads lowered and mouths shut. But humiliation burns hotter than pain, and vengeance was already brewing. The HOA president, a man named Gerald Price, wasn't used to losing control. For 10 years he had run this neighborhood like a private kingdom. The board was his counsel, the bylaws his scripture. But now there was someone who had publicly defied him, and worse, someone people were starting to admire. For it, he sat at his oak desk that afternoon, flipping through violation reports that suddenly felt useless. His office smelled of stale coffee and printer ink. His wife Eleanor hovered in the doorway. "You can't let this fester," she said. "The neighbors are talking. They're saying she did something." Gerald's jaw flexed. "She embarrassed us. That's all. But if I don't act now, she'll become a symbol." "A symbol?" "Yes," he snapped. "A symbol that our rules mean nothing. That anyone can defy me and get away with it." He leaned forward, voice low. "I'll crush that symbol before it spreads." That night, the woman sat in her living room with the lights off. She pressed a cold cloth against her cheek where the slap had landed. The sting had faded, but the memory lingered. She wasn't afraid, though. Fear was what they wanted, and she had spent too many years of her life refusing to give it to men like them. Her name was Maya, and Maya had a past the HOA could never have imagined. Years ago, she had been part of something larger, something dangerous. She had walked in places where power wasn't a word in a rule book, but a weapon drawn across battle lines. She had survived betrayals deeper than anything these homeowners could conjure. And though she had come here seeking peace, seeking quiet, she knew one truth. When violence finds you, peace is over. She set the cloth aside, stood, and looked out the window. The biker's tire tracks still scarred her driveway. Her cheeks still burned. But inside her chest, a fire had been lit. They thought they could break her. They didn't realize they had just woken something stronger. The next day, Gerald convened an emergency meeting of the board. 5 members sat around the long polished table in the clubhouse. Their voices hushed but urgent. "She's dangerous," muttered one. "Did you see what happened? Those men didn't just fall, they were thrown. Thrown by what?" Another snapped. "Don't tell me you believe those ridiculous rumors." "I don't know what I believe. But I know the neighborhood is slipping out of our control. We need to act." Gerald raised a hand, silencing them. "Enough. We're not children gossiping at a schoolyard. We are the board. And the board decides what is order." He leaned forward, eyes sharp. "She will either comply, or she will be removed." The word hung heavy in the air. "Removed," whispered one woman, her pearl earrings trembling against her neck. "Yes," Gerald said. "By force, if necessary." The room went silent. And just like that, the board crossed a line they could never uncross. That night, Maya received another letter. Slid under her door without a knock, without a word. She opened it slowly, reading the bold red ink. Final warning. But instead of fear, she smiled. A slow, dangerous smile. Because she wasn't planning to hide anymore. No, she was planning to fight, and what the board didn't know what Gerald Price couldn't possibly imagine was that Maya already had allies, not neighbors, not friends, something else, something that had been waiting for her to call by the third night. The cul-de-sac no longer felt ordinary. Dogs barked restlessly at shadows. Lights flickered even when bulbs were new, and the air itself seemed charged, like static before a lightning strike. Neighbors avoided Maya's house, crossing the street rather than walk past her gate. Whispers grew wilder. "She's a witch. She's cursed. She's protected." The bikers hadn't returned, but their silence was louder than engines. Everyone knew revenge was coming. The question was when, and how brutal it would be. Maya lit a single candle in her living room that night. The flame danced, casting shadows against the walls. She whispered words no one outside her past could understand. Words meant to awaken strength long buried. She wasn't powerless. She had never been powerless. She had only been waiting. And now the waiting was over. Outside, the street was silent again. Too silent, Maya's eyes narrowed. She knew what silence before violence sounded like. She had heard it in war zones, in alleys dripping with danger. In places where life could end with the squeeze of a trigger, the bikers were coming back. And this time, they weren't coming alone. The stage was set. The neighborhood didn't know it yet. But they were about to witness a war between control and defiance. Fear and fire, law and survival, and Maya. She wasn't backing down. She was just getting started. If you thought the slap was the end, you're wrong. That was only the beginning. What's coming next will shake this entire HOA to its core. Stay with me, because the next videos will leave you speechless. They thought the first fall was humiliating, but what awaited them next would make the whole neighborhood tremble. The night stretched long and heavy, like a curtain waiting to be torn down. Streetlights buzzed and dimmed one by one, casting strange patterns across the pavement. Neighbors locked their doors early, double-checked their windows, and whispered prayers into the dark, because everyone knew the bikers would be back, and when they returned, they wouldn't come quietly. Maya sat at her kitchen table, The candle from the night before burned down to a stump. Her cheeks still bore a faint shadow from the slap, but her spirit was sharper than ever. She traced her finger along the grain of the wooden table, remembering nights from long ago, nights where she had prepared for worse than this. Nights when she had stood alone against forces far more dangerous than neighborhood. Bullies. She had chosen peace when she moved here, but peace had been ripped from her hands. Now she had no choice but to fight. The rumble came first. Engines in the distance. Deep and angry, growing louder with each passing second. The ground seemed to shake under the weight of them. Headlights pierced the street. One bike, then another, then a third. They didn't come alone this time. 5 bikers pulled up, their leather jackets gleaming under the dim light, faces hidden beneath shadows and helmets. The neighbors peeked through blinds, hearts racing, but none dared to step outside. They had seen what happened the last time, and fear wrapped around them like chains. The tallest biker, the one with the snake tattoo, removed his helmet. His jaw was bruised, his lips split from the fall days earlier. His eyes burned with rage. "Come out," he growled, his voice echoing down the street. "Come out and face us." Maya didn't make them wait. The porch light flicked on, and there she was, standing tall, arms crossed. Gaze unflinching. "You should have learned the first time," she said. The bikers laughed, though the sound was hollow, forced. "You think you're strong? You think you're untouchable? Tonight, we'll make sure you never stand up again." The leader motioned, and 2 of the bikers stepped forward. They carried chains, the metal clinking like a promise of pain. Another pulled out a wooden bat. This wasn't intimidation anymore. This was war. Maya didn't move. The neighbors whispered, horrified. Some prayed she would surrender, that she would beg for mercy, anything to avoid what was coming. But Maya's eyes didn't show fear. They showed something else, something dangerous. The bikers rushed her. The first swung his chain, the sound slicing through the night. But before it could land, Maya sidestepped, grabbed his arm, and twisted with a force that cracked bone. His scream tore through the cul-de-sac as he fell to the ground, chain clattering uselessly beside him. The second biker lunged with the bat. Maya ducked, drove her elbow into his ribs, and swept his legs out from under him. He landed hard, the bat rolling away. The neighbors gasped, covering their mouths. This wasn't luck. This wasn't chance. Maya was fighting like someone who had been trained for years. Someone who had survived battles far deadlier than this. The remaining 3 bikers hesitated. For a moment, just a moment, fear flickered in their eyes. The leader snarled, "Get her." They charged together. The street erupted in chaos. Fists, boots, chains metal against skin, bone against bone. Maya moved like fire, every strike precise, every counter merciless. She fought not with rage, but with control, as though she had been waiting for this moment her entire life, and one by one, the bikers fell. By the end, the ground was littered with groaning bodies, broken weapons, and pride shattered beyond repair. Maya stood in the center, breathing heavy, cheek glistening with sweat, eyes burning with defiance. The neighbors, watching in stunned silence, realized something terrifying. She wasn't just resisting, she was winning. But victory comes at a cost. The next morning, Gerald Price received a phone call that nearly shattered his calm facade. They failed. He hissed into the receiver. All of them. The voice on the other end stammered, excuses, broken bones, fear, humiliation, but Gerald wasn't listening. His mind was already racing. This wasn't just a rebellious homeowner anymore. This was a rebellion, and rebellions, if left unchecked, became revolutions. Gerald slammed the phone down, his breath coming sharp and fast. His reflection in the office window looked less like a leader and more like a desperate man. He whispered to himself, "She won't destroy what I've built. She won't." Meanwhile, the neighborhood had changed. People walked differently, their eyes darting, their voices hushed. Some spoke of Maya with awe, calling her brave, even heroic. Others avoided her entirely, convinced she was cursed. Children whispered about the night of the fight as though it were a ghost story, but Maya didn't care about whispers. She knew the battle wasn't over. She knew Gerald would come for her again. The question was, how far was he willing to go? The answer came faster than anyone expected. Within days, Gerald ordered patrol cars through the neighborhood. Not official police, but hired guards in uniforms that looked close enough to intimidate. They prowled the streets, stopping near Maya's house, shining lights into her windows at night. Letters turned into threats. Threats turned into fines. And behind it all, Gerald smiled. But Maya didn't flinch. Instead, she began preparing. She fixed the broken fence in her backyard, reinforced her doors, stored food and water. She wasn't preparing for a fine or for harassment. She was preparing for war because she knew Gerald's type. She had seen them before. And she knew men like him didn't stop until someone forced them to. The third night after the fight, Gerald himself appeared. He stood at the edge of her driveway, flanked by 2 guards. His suit was immaculate, his expression cold. He didn't knock. He didn't call out. He simply stood, staring, waiting. Maya stepped onto the porch, arms folded. "You've lost twice now," she said. "You should quit before it gets worse." Gerald's lips curled into a thin smile. "You don't understand, do you? This neighborhood isn't yours. It's mine. Every blade of grass, every drop of paint, every inch of pavement. You live here because I allow it. And when I decide you don't belong," he snapped his fingers. The guard stepped forward. Maya didn't move. "You'll regret this," Gerald said softly. "I promise you, you'll regret ever thinking you could stand against me." Maya leaned forward, her voice calm but sharp as glass. "No, Gerald. The only one who will regret anything is you." The guards advanced. But something unexpected happened. From the shadows of the neighboring houses, figures began to appear. Quietly at first, then bolder. Neighbors. Men and women who had stayed silent for too long. Some held cameras. Others simply stood with arms crossed. One by one, they lined the sidewalk. Their presence undeniable. For the first time, Gerald faltered. His smile flickered, because suddenly, this wasn't just about Maya. This was about the neighborhood. And the neighborhood was watching. The guards hesitated. Maya didn't need to move. Her strength was no longer just her it was in the silent support rising around her. Gerald's fists clenched. He hissed under his breath, "This isn't over," and he left. His guards trailing behind him. But Maya knew the truth. It wasn't over. It was only just beginning that night. Gerald sat alone in his study, staring at a file spread across his desk. Inside were records Maya's past, her history, fragments of who she had been before she moved here. He had found things. Dangerous things. He smiled to himself. Though it was a bitter smile. "If I can't break her," he whispered, "I'll expose her." And with that, Gerald set a plan in motion that would turn the entire neighborhood upside down. Because sometimes, the most dangerous weapon isn't fists or chains, it's secrets. You saw the bikers fall. You saw Gerald's power start to crumble. But you haven't seen anything yet. The truth about Maya's past will explode into the open, and Gerald's next move will push everyone past the point of no return. Watch until the end, because the ending will leave you breathless. Asterisk, they thought. Exposing her past would destroy her. But the truth only made her stronger, and it was the HOA that began to fall apart. Gerald Price didn't sleep the night he found the file. He sat hunched at his desk, the glow of his lamp bathing the papers in yellow light. His eyes scanned the words again and again, lips curling with satisfaction. Maya Jackson. That was her full name. Former military contractor. Dishonorably discharged under circumstances sealed from public record. But Gerald had ways of finding things that weren't meant to be found. He had pieced together scraps, whispers of operations overseas, rumors of disappearances. Files so heavily redacted they looked like shadows on a page. She wasn't just a homeowner, she was dangerous. Gerald leaned back, exhaling slowly. So that's who you really are. To him, this was the weapon he had been waiting for. He couldn't beat her in the street. He couldn't silence her through force. But reputation? Reputation could be destroyed, and once he turned the neighborhood against her, she'd be finished. The next morning, glossy envelopes appeared in every mailbox. Inside was a letter from the HOA board, stamped with Gerald's signature. But it wasn't about lawn violations or paint colors this time. It was about Maya. The letter claimed she was unstable, dangerous, that her past was full of violence and secrets too dark to ignore. Words like unfit, threat, and unsafe for the community jumped off the page. Neighbors gathered in driveways, clutching the letters with trembling hands. Some gasped, horrified. Others shook their heads, not wanting to believe. But the seed had been planted. Doubt spread like wildfire. By afternoon, whispers filled the cul-de-sac. Children were pulled indoors. Curtains snapped shut when Maya walked by. She could feel it, the shift, the coldness. Not from everyone, but enough. When she picked up her own envelope, she read it slowly, lips tightening. She wasn't surprised. Gerald had finally played his hand, but he had underestimated her. Maya didn't hide from the letter. She walked to the center of the cul-de-sac that evening, holding it high in the air. Neighbors peeked out, uncertain. The air was heavy, waiting. "This is what fear looks like," she called out, her voice strong. "A man so desperate to keep control that he'll twist lies out of the truth." Her words rang out. "Yes, I have a past. Yes, I've fought battles. And yes, I've seen things none of you could imagine. But I moved here to live in peace. And when they tried to take that from me, I stood up. That's not a threat. That's survival." Her eyes swept across the houses. "So you decide what's more dangerous? Someone who stands against bullies, or the man who controls you with fear?" The silence was long, thick. Then, from the shadows, an elderly man stepped forward. Mr. Whitaker, who had lived in the neighborhood since it was built. His voice trembled, but it carried. "She's right." Murmurs rippled. A young mother added, "I'm tired of living scared." One by one, voices rose. Not all, but enough. Enough for Gerald to hear the cracks forming in his kingdom. From across the street, he watched, face pale, jaw tight. He hadn't destroyed her. He had given her a platform. And worse, he had lost control of the narrative. That night, Gerald met with the remaining bikers. Broken bones or not, humiliation or not, they were still his blunt weapon. But this time, he didn't just want intimidation. "This ends tonight," Gerald hissed. "I don't care how. Burn her house if you have to. Just make her disappear." The bikers exchanged uneasy looks. They had seen what Maya could do. But Gerald's money, Gerald's promises, Gerald's rage was enough to push them into the fire one last time. They roared into the cul-de-sac after midnight, engines screaming like war cries. Flames licked from bottles in their hands. Neighbors woke to the sound of chaos. Screams filled the night as glass shattered against Maya's porch. Fire blooming across the wood. But Maya was ready. She burst through the front door before the flames could spread. Blazing. She moved with precision, grabbing a burning bottle with gloved hands and hurling it back toward the bikers. It exploded against the pavement, flames scattering at their feet. The battle ignited, chains swung, flames crackled. The roar of engines mixed with the cries of neighbors who had finally rushed outside, no longer able to stay silent. Phones recorded, shouts echoed, fear and courage clashed in the night. Maya fought like a storm, dodging, striking, unrelenting. The bikers, desperate and enraged, fought back with everything they had left, and then dash sirens, red and blue lights sliced through the dark. Police. Cars screeched to a halt, officers flooding the street. But instead of arresting Maya, instead of siding with Gerald, they turned on the bikers. Handcuffs clicked. Flames were stamped out. Gerald stood frozen on his porch, the scene unraveling before him. He had lost control completely. Neighbors pointed fingers not at Maya, but at him. He ordered this. This is Gerald's doing. The words spread like wildfire, louder than any letter he had mailed for the first time. Gerald Price looked small when the dust settled. Maya stood in the center of the cul-de-sac, chest rising and falling with exhaustion. The neighbors gathered around her, not all, but enough. Enough to show they had chosen a side. One officer approached her quietly. "Ma'am, we've seen the reports. You're not the problem here." Maya nodded once. She didn't need their validation. She already knew. Across the street, Gerald was led away in handcuffs, shouting about bylaws, about order, about how this wasn't over. But his voice was drowned out by the sound of neighbors cheering softly, clapping, reclaiming their street. In the weeks that followed, the neighborhood changed. The HOA board collapsed under pressure, members resigning one by one. Gerald faced charges that stretched far beyond harassment. The bikers disappeared, their engines never heard again. And Maya. She rebuilt her porch, repainted her shutters, planted flowers brighter than ever before. Neighbors came by, some apologizing, some thanking her, some simply standing beside her as a quiet show of respect. But late at night, when the cul-de-sac was still, Maya sat on her porch with a cup of tea and thought about the truth. Peace had been restored, but it was fragile because there would always be another Gerald, another bully, another battle, and she would be ready, always ready. You've seen the bikers fall, you've seen the board crumble, and you've seen Maya rise stronger than ever. But what if I told you Gerald's story isn't over? Because behind every HOA president, there's someone bigger pulling the strings. Stay with me, because the new videos will reveal just how deep this fight really goes.